It is time now for Money, Power, Politics. And today, a verdict in a landmark social media case in California. Meta and YouTube were found liable of harming a teenager with addictive features in order to pay $6 million in total damages. That might seem like a drop in the bucket, which it absolutely is for these massive platforms. But the New York Times points out that it could open these social media companies up to thousands more lawsuits over users and their well-being. Both Meta and YouTube have said they disagree with the decision and they plan to appeal it. However, it comes just one day after a jury in New Mexico found that Meta violated state child safety laws, and the penalty there was $375 million in damage. Again, that is a parking ticket for Zuckerberg, but it opens a great big door. What is your reaction to this one?
Well, it seems like it could burst the dam. As you said, I mean, this just opens the door. And the thing that's interesting, I guess, from the legal perspective, is the way this was one of not so much the content, but the design, the original design. There was a design included in the features that was preying on children.
Yeah, thousands of similar lawsuits have been filed. I almost laugh saying, is there a universe where it becomes so expensive for these platforms that they're forced to change? And I say it sort of tongue-in-cheek because the amount of money these companies have is so mind-blowing. I can't even believe there could be an idea that anything is too expensive.
Yeah, but also, as with the tobacco companies, every new lawsuit is also public, right? Every new lawsuit produces new evidence, it produces new defendants, and it produces new publicity that allows us to think about what these social media networks are doing in our lives.
But we don't stop using any of them. We say how much we hate them while we're scrolling.
But I want to jump on, while we're scrolling is crucial. I want to jump on what Mark just said. This is really important. Since 1996, websites have been protected for liability against content that they host on someone else's behalf.
Yes.
This is sort of Section 230 is what they call it. So it's been very difficult to find networks at fault for really awful stuff that they're giving to children and the rest of us because they hold up Section 230 and they say, we're sorry, we're not liable. This legal strategy that Mark pointed out gets around that by saying, we don't care about the content right now. We're talking about the feature that keeps you infinitely scrolling. We're talking about the recommendations that addict you to the
algorithm that
site.
Hooks you in.
And so that stuff they're absolutely liable for. And Mark's absolutely right. They do it by design. They're trying to keep us all scrolling. It's bad for us. It's really bad for kids. And so this strategy that has now worked in 2 states is going to work in the other 48.
This is being called the big tobacco moment for social media. Do you agree with that?
I do, and I think there are a couple of brilliant women behind this. One of them I had in class 3 weeks ago, Frances Haugen, you may remember.
Oh, we know her well on this show.
She is fantastic, and maybe I stole her from the show. We had her in class. She was tremendous as she testified in Congress in I think it was 2024, and pointed out that with the leaked evidence that she showed, there was incontrovertible evidence that they were consciously manipulating algorithms to try to hook young women into this negative body images, and that the senior executives knew about this. A Facebook insider. And speaking of insiders, as you mentioned the tobacco case, and you asked me about tobacco, you remember that Jeffrey Wiegand, I think it was Brown and Williamson, who was the whistleblower there, that back in 1998, that master settlement was $206 billion ultimately. That's a lot of money, even for Mark Zuckerberg. We know it's small. But on top of that is, who's the other woman? There's Allison Sterling and her partner, Josh Koskoff. That's who exploded what we have before us here. Is they're the ones who went after the gun makers in Sofa versus Bushmaster in Connecticut. After the murders in Connecticut, they're the ones, and this is Dick Blumenthal's son is part of this at that firm too, where they used product liability to get around this, Section 230 issues and freedom of speech liability is a product safety issues. That was absolutely brilliant, and that opened a big door. What you wound up there is that I think there was a $75 million settlement there, but it opened up the door for all these other Alex Jones lawsuits.
I don't want to rain on this parade here, but we are in the middle of an election year that is a pitched battle between people who want to regulate the tech industry and have a little bit of money, and the tech industry, which is dumping unbelievably huge amounts of money onto every election that they can get their hands on.
And Zuckerberg was just appointed in the last 2 days to Trump's Council for Science and Technology. I mean, these guys couldn't be closer to this administration.
The public has been upset about children on these apps for a very, very long time. They have not found in any presidency, really, a lot of pushback And this one particularly sort of has embraced them a great deal. But these are very, very powerful people with a lot of political power that they are flexing right now specifically to get no one to ever regulate them. And it's going to be a big question at the end of this year that if these moments like you're talking about where we've seen the public rise up actually result in anything actually happening, or in a Congress that just sort of passes laws saying you can't do anything about anything.
Evan, those rich dudes had little effect on the Senate. Marsha Blackburn and Dick Blumenthal managed to get through a Senate an overwhelmingly positive vote. You're right on the House.
An overwhelmingly positive vote for what?
In favor of regulation of child safety.
Okay, but let's be honest. Do you remember the overwhelming vote that happened to ban TikTok in the United States? The bipartisan legislation that got through. What happened with that? We pretended like it never happened, and TikTok keeps on kicking with some of the biggest U.S. investors now owning. Larry Ellison, one of those owners, who Donald Trump just put on another advisory board. So Marsha Blackburn and Dick Blumenthal could vote all the way to the bank, and nothing's happening on these things when the big tech guys are involved.
Well, as you're bringing in the Trump factor now too, and what's going to happen here that's dangerous is as you talk about Section 230. Because a lot of people on the right don't like Section 230, and that's the part that's scary. Is there you could get some relaxation of Section 230, but not for the right reasons, as Trump and Brendan Carr can manipulate it to create problems for us here, and freedom of expression because they don't like.
But you brought up tobacco as a parallel. Well, a lot less people are smoking today. And one impact is just that consumers become more aware of what these companies are trying to do to them, and they self-regulate what their children are doing.
Yeah.
This is a great point. All right, quickly before we go, what is your take on this? Meta is now cutting their AI spending. That's a big surprise to me.
Mark Zuckerberg doesn't really know how to do anything except start a social network. Like he's
okay, yeah, but any company out there where they're adding the words AI at the end of their name and people can't wait to go all in.
Ask them why they called the company Meta. They're not in the metasphere anymore either.
There you go.
That was several $100 billion that went out the window.
But he's desperate. He's flailing because he knows how to do one thing, and he already did it in the early 2000s. They made a movie about it. He has not innovated a single thing since then. All he does is buy other people's ideas. Oculus, Instagram. He is incapable of innovating something new, and I think that must eat at his soul.